my daughter, I have a 17-year-old who has like in the millions of views. I'm like,
really?
Whoa.
What's going on here? She's into
the kids know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Balance for Life podcast. Our goal here is to help you unlock and uncover the secrets of true happiness and lasting success. If you like what you hear, as you can see, things are going to be a little bit different today. So if you like what you hear, make sure you give us good reviews and comment, interact with anything, hit that like button, and
join us on social media.
Yeah.
And we're going to have you join us on social media as well as our friend Chris. You can find us at Balance for Life Podcast. That's the number 4 on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then on Twitter or X, whatever it's called. We're at Adam and Perry. Maybe we'll start posting there if people start following us.
Yeah,
that's the way it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then on YouTube as well. If you're watching on YouTube, good on you.
Yeah,
it's Balance for Life. Just search that and you'll find us.
All right. So jumping into this, we are so stoked for this episode. Those of you that are watching,
more than usual.
Yeah, more than usual. Those of you that are watching can see that we have a guest here sitting next to us. So quick introduction. Chris Wilkins comes to us. I've known Chris pretty much all my life. I think we played Little League ball together.
It's been at least 26 years probably.
I want to say how long.
Hey, I'm 40. I'm 40.
I'm not quite there yet. But yeah, I think we even played Little League ball together 10, 12 years before that. So known each other a long time, and I'm stoked to have you here. Chris is the clinical director, the founder of Hobble Creek Behavioral Health, currently in Spanish Fork. Also the founder of the Heal the Hurt Foundation, 501(c)(3).
And for those that aren't from Utah, it's Heal the Hurt. Sounds like you're saying Heal the Hurt.
Oh, sorry. So Heal the Hurt.
So I didn't grow up in Utah. And I would say, like, I grew up in California, and the way people from California and Utah speak is actually really similar. But that's one of the differences I've noticed is we say, like, feel, while people from Utah say fill.
Phil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Heal the Hurt Foundation. So, yeah, anything you want to share about what you're getting into now?
Man, there are a lot of struggles that we deal with in our world today, and this topic for today is spot on for some of the things that we're working toward. So our organization, both programs, the focus is helping people heal and balance and have happiness in their lives. And so we primarily at Hobble Creek, we primarily treat addiction and trauma issues. We treat individuals and groups and the whole family system. We have a holistic, integrative approach. And then Heal the Hurt is kind of the nonprofit component. It acts as a scholarship fund when people need treatment, from detox and medical services to residential treatment, but they don't have insurance or any kind of funding. We want to get them to the treatment regardless of their ability to access that care. And so we have a scholarship fund that helps people get those treatments that they need.
That's awesome. I love what you guys do. Those of you that have seen Chris on his podcast, you said you're launching a second one now. So do you want to share anything about the podcast?
So we have, and we're on Spotify, YouTube. It's at Heal the Hurt, or it will be at Heal the Hurt Nonprofit or Heal the Hurt USA, just depending on what handle was available at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then this new podcast that we're launching is a deep dive into 12-step programming, kind of the tenets of addicts or Alcoholics Anonymous and the big book of AA. And that one's at Do Your Dailies. And so you'll find that everywhere. So yeah, Do Your Dailies and Heal the Hurt are those two.
I could imagine us having you back on in the future for different topics
let's plan
too.
on that. In fact, let's check our calendars right now.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Yeah.
we're all about balance in like all areas of your life, and one of the things that I think destroys balance more than anything is addiction.
Yeah.
And so
For sure.
that's something that we could have you on to talk about. That would be awesome.
Absolutely, be glad to.
So you're our first guest. and we're excited. I'm thrilled to have you as our first guest. I've been wanting to get you on here for a long time. So the question that I have for you is this. First question, I guess, is this: what is the first thing that comes to your mind when we say the word balance?
Just a little bit longer word, homeostasis. Just things are operating within a system in accordance with each other, that they're in collaboration. And that leaves a little bit of room for error or flaw or illness or something along those lines. We're not firing on all cylinders all the time. Mm-hmm. But the balance within a system, one strength will accommodate for or buoy up maybe a weakness within that. And so you could talk about that with teams. You could talk about that within the individual. You could talk about that within a family system, governments, and those kinds of things. And so having that balance, recognizing that things are firing at their best, it doesn't necessarily mean perfect. I don't think balance is perfect. You know.
I love that. I think it fits perfectly with what we've got, because we've talked about our 4 pillars and how, you know, one of them might be a little bit subpar at some times and others might be a little bit higher, and it's always just finding that balance, and I love that.
Yeah, that is awesome. I hadn't thought about it that way. When you think about a team where you have your star player, maybe 2 star players, and then you have these role players, and just because, you know, a couple guys are better than the others doesn't mean there's not a balance. It's like if everyone knows their role, then that's where you achieve balance. And I think within ourselves, like, hey, my financial health might be struggling a little bit right now, but if I'm able to really focus on my mental health and my physical health, that's going to boost my financial health, right? And so just focusing on, okay, where are my strengths? How do I maximize those? And then where are my weaknesses? How do I bring those up a little bit?
Perfect.
I like that. So I've been wanting to talk about this on an episode for a while, like even during our hiatus that we had. This was when this came up in my mind. And what happened was I saw a Facebook post by Matt Walsh that said, men shouldn't cry, period. And I've watched some Matt Walsh videos. I don't follow him super closely. Sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I don't. We're going to try to avoid getting too political here.
Yeah.
But basically, I'll preface this by saying that I tend to lean a little bit conservative, but I try to see the good in both sides of the argument, and usually I can. For a lot of issues, I can see the good in both sides, and as I've gotten older, I've kind of gravitated more toward the middle of the political spectrum. But I watch Matt Walsh, and sometimes like, wow, what he said just makes total sense, and sometimes like, what is he talking about? You know, that's kind of my interaction with watching his videos and things like that. That's, you know, it's hit and miss for me.
Yeah.
And when I saw this men shouldn't cry period, I was like, what is he talking about? And I came to the realization he's probably looking for a reaction, right? You post something outrageous, you get a reaction, it boosts your SEO. I get that. And I think that's what he was going for, because as I watched a couple of his videos talking about men not crying, that wasn't his message. His message was men shouldn't cry in public except with some exceptions. And he gave some exceptions, a couple of which were very serious and a couple of which were obviously joking.
The end of the movie Rudy.
The end of the movie Rudy, right? That's an acceptable, for me it was when Sam told Frodo to go home.
Yeah.
In Lord of the Rings, that was when I cried. Right?
The end of Braveheart, when
the end of Braveheart,
yells, freedom.
Right, so there's some exceptions that are a little bit humorous that he goes into. And then there are some that are serious, like, a funeral for a loved one, or if you're maybe at church and something very spiritual touches you, like but what's funny is he says, like, it's acceptable to shed a tear or two, with dignity. And basically what his whole message though was more political. It was like men should stop crying while like giving a speech or whatever to try to manipulate people. And I can understand that. But I feel like his overall message of like, you got to be tougher than that, I feel like that can cause damage. So that was what I wanted to address is, what are the benefits of crying? Is there truth to, maybe that we shouldn't cry too much? Is there truth to that at all? And, having a therapist on to talk about your experiences with that, I think is awesome. So with that said, we want to get your take on what he said, and we'll ask you some questions.
I've been really excited to have this conversation. And I was at breakfast this morning with some of my buddies, and right before breakfast, I sent out the videos and said, what is your guys' take? That's not even true. I didn't ask them their take. I just said, I'm going to be talking about this. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of different perspectives. And so to lead out, I want to just acknowledge we are all subjective in how we communicate. And so I think there's this tendency in our world to go, well, my opinion is the universal opinion and everyone should think how I think. And that's one issue that I think we struggle with as humans that divides us, is I'm right, you're wrong kind of a mentality. And if I'm going to acknowledge that you're right, that must mean then that I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's not mutually exclusive. So when I read his heading, the title of his video, I go, what? Like, you're already operating in absolutes. Yeah. And like you mentioned before, like you've heard some things from him and I've heard some things from him and I go, great point. I agree with that. And then I hear some things and I'm like, it's a little bit problematic with maybe how you said it or what you portrayed. And I don't want to get into his brain or assume that I know what his intentions are. But that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to avoid, I should say.
Yeah,
because I want to go, what's he looking for?
And people on the right and on the left both do it, right? Yes. Where like this is not an attack on Matt Walsh. This is analyzing what he said and what we
just
think about
his content, because we're not going to be productive if we start to focus on the man, that person, and what his intentions are. We could do that, and it might be fun. But we want, I think collectively, we want something that's productive for the three of us, but then also anybody who's going to listen or watch this, right? So when he says, where was that? Men should not cry. Period. That's not true.
Yeah, and it's not even what he means.
And exactly. I thought that same thing, that what he's saying wasn't the body. It wasn't the body and the actual narrative of then the discussion point. And so it was almost clickbait. Do I dare?
I felt like there was a little clickbait. And I think he knew it was, and I think he did it on purpose.
Yeah. And sometimes we enjoy drama. Sometimes we enjoy
for sure.
I'm gonna light a fire here and I'm gonna step back just to watch it because it's entertaining. Yeah. Right. And so again, I don't know his motives. I don't know his intentions. We can only gather information and make an assessment based on our own subjective experiences. So in that video, Matt talks about being a father of 4. And even within that, the part of my brain goes, well, I'm a father of 5. So
I'm better.
So we do that. That's part of the human condition, kind of part of the human experience where we want to connect with people. We thrive on connection, but then we're also looking for how we can exclude in a way. And I think there's a carnalness to that. I'm not suggesting that it's a good or healthy or balanced, but it's something that we do, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay to shed a tear or two. The critique in me goes, okay, I'm going to be watching somebody and going, there's 1.
Yeah.
And there's 2. Okay, you're done. Shut it off. Numb out. That's not healthy. So from the therapist's perspective, I want you to cry. It's not that I want to hurt you. I don't want you to be in pain. But when you come into my office, stuff's going on. Mm-hmm. No one's coming to this expensive friend to go, how's your day going?
Right.
How are things? My life's great. Yeah. I'm here for you. No, it's expensive. And I'll tell my people up front, I'm a very expensive friend. So if you need me, I'm here for you and I care about you. But when you don't need me anymore, you could go buy everybody lunch and have the same experience, right? So I do believe that it's very therapeutic to cry, but part of the issue comes in when we're trying to force something. Mm-hmm. And I think Matt even talks about, and I'll pause here after a second, Matt acknowledges that there are people who do this in dramatic fashion, politicians, people in the media or whatever. There's that manipulative tactic to it. And so that's what got me going, I see what he's doing here.
Right.
It's okay to cry. I endorse people feeling their emotions, whether crying or otherwise, as long as it's safe, and it's not being violent or hurting somebody else. but it's when anything is used to exaggerate and to manipulate, especially in a conniving way.
Mhm.
And so in his video, as he showed a couple of, the crying atoms, and I thought about
I know.
that,
I thought that was
as he
funny
talked
too.
about the crying atoms. As a therapist, again, I can't observe somebody in video, especially across state lines, and diagnose them, right? But I know what to pick up on. I know the signs to look for, and that's a bunch of bull. Okay, that was not genuine. That was not authentic. And we know when we dig a little bit deeper, perhaps what some people's motives are. Man or woman, the manipulative hijacking of emotions is wrong. So I'll make that statement.
And I think, Matt would probably agree with this, that it's not just men that do that sometimes. I had a girlfriend in high school that was very manipulative, and one of the ways she did it was through crying. Sometimes it was through yelling or whatever. It's crazy to me that I was like in an abusive relationship in high school, but and now I have a wonderful relationship with my wife. But I think crying can be used to manipulate, and that should be avoided.
Yeah. And I think when I was watching this video and other videos and other Facebook posts, and I'm one of the ones that likes to thrive on that. You see the clickbait, and I just want to go read the comments, and like get my popcorn, and I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's see what's happening. And so, I probably spent an hour last night alone just reading through the comments on some of his Facebook posts, and how divided it was. But yeah, I did kind of gather this main point that he has of, sometimes it's healthy and sometimes it's okay, but we really need to have kind of this outward appearance of strength. I think is what his idea was, is that men are supposed to put on this armor almost, and this outward appearance of strength. And I liked the other post that Perry brought up, is when he said, let's see.
When we say that men shouldn't cry,
when we say that men shouldn't cry, it is not just a joke. There's an important truth here. The world needs men to pick up their burdens, shoulder them quietly, and get on with business. And so when I was watching these videos last night and reading through some of this stuff, I actually had my wife and my 17-year-old daughter sitting next to me. And my 17-year-old daughter is actually a lot more on the liberal side of things. And so it's interesting when we start having conversations about any kind of political or religious or anything like that. And so I'm sitting there watching these videos, and both my wife and my daughter are just in complete shock at what they're hearing. And my daughter literally stood up and she goes, "Well, that's not healthy." And I'm like, at 17 years old, you can hear just the irony and the unhealthy and the toxicity in this message. And to me, it was, even though the point is there of, sometimes it's okay, but it shouldn't be all the time, and it shouldn't be used to manipulate, the way that we present that message can be very damaging as well.
Yeah, my initial reaction to, the world needs men to pick up their burdens, shoulder them quietly, and get on with business. I think, there are certain burdens I can definitely do that with, and no problem, right? There are certain things that kind of weigh me down a little bit, but it's not enough to the point to where I feel like I need to talk about it. And there have been times where I'm like, I'm not going to bring this up to my wife because it gets her down, and I don't need it. If I don't need to talk about it because it's mild enough, or playing basketball is going to help me get through it, or whatever, lifting weights kind of gets me through it, fine. But there are other burdens that I absolutely need to talk to her about. And when I talk with her about it, it might get her down a little bit, but she is okay with that because she knows it helps me. And then when my emotions impact her emotions considerably, and I think that's normal, but it feels like it might be more than usual, in a relationship. I don't know if that's true, but I've noticed that if me talking with her about the way I'm feeling gets her down a little bit, it helps me kind of get up, and then it pulls her back up too. So she sits there and she feels that with me, and then we both come out of it together. And I don't think that's a bad thing for me to do that when I need that. And if my concern is, if you try to shoulder your burdens quietly too much, it just builds up and builds up to the point where you can't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it makes me wonder about what is the threshold that is too much.
Mm-hmm.
and I'll speak from experience as a husband and as a father, and I'm in I had a previous marriage, and I can pull from experiences there, and now my current marriage, and then all the work that I've done as a therapist for 20 years. That's not true. 15 years. I'm 40. My memory's already gone. But 15 years as a therapist, practicing, helping other people, there is an overwhelming communication that people receive. And I'm not saying people tell you this, but it's a message that's received. Suck it up, deal with it. No one cares. Just you're on your own, right? And there's the potential that people, if they watch Matt Walsh's story there, will receive a message like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not even suggesting that that's what his intention is. But part of my cause is recognizing the ones who, even if they're small in numbers, the ones who will receive the message that way, that I don't matter, right? That's a huge issue. Earlier I said something about not being a fan of extreme statements or like all or nothing
Absolutes,
kind of statements.
Yeah.
Absolutes.
Only Sith deal in absolutes.
And every once in a while I'll say, this one's an absolute. I have not worked with a person in my lifetime as a therapist who felt like they were enough. Okay. So 15 years as a clinical therapist. Okay. This isn't, I dig into some other things in my spare time. I watch sports. I follow sports. I follow politics. I look at culture and a lot of things. I spend a couple of hours every day really digging into some of that stuff. But this is my trade. This is my life. This is on a separate level. This is why I feel God put me on this earth, was to do work like this. Every single person I've worked with doesn't realize that they're enough. And so my worry is in extreme statements like Matt Walsh gave there, and those are all around us, but the people who already don't feel like they're worthy, that they're good enough, that they matter, will hear that and they'll interpret it in their own way through their own lens, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to champion that it is okay to feel. I also think that there are times where, as men, we might see our partner struggling with stress, anxiety, child raising, their job, family dynamics, like whatever it is. And we see that stress and we go, well, I can't unload more onto you. I can't tell you that I'm stressed too, because I don't know how you're going to deal with that. I don't want to burden you more. And I think that's one thing that causes men to go, okay, I'll just shoulder this. I'll just deal with this on my own. We could dissect this even more at some point in the future, but I would love for men and women to acknowledge, look, sometimes you're going to struggle and you're going to need me a little bit more, and I'm here for you. And the opposite. Sometimes I'm going to be doing really well. How can I help you a little bit more? Where can I buoy you up? Where can I connect with you more? Because there are not relationships that are 50-50. That doesn't exist. If at all, for a brief second. But usually somebody's doing a little bit extra, and then it shifts back the other way, whether it's a day by day, whether it's 1 year at a time or something like that. As you talked about your relationship, it made me start thinking about the terms codependency and interdependency. Whereas, look, I can be myself and push everybody else away, and I'll just feel my stuff. I'm not likely to actually feel it in a productive way. If I'm codependent, there's a power differential there. It's not healthy at all. It's not balanced at all, right? But that interdependency acknowledges that it's give take, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm going to need you a little bit more. You're going to need to help me more, and then I'm returning that favor, probably even more so. It's debits and what is that called? Debits and
credits.
Credits, yeah. It's that kind of a system.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the dynamics of a healthy relationship. But it goes back to this concept of we're going to cry, and that's okay. But also sometimes when I'm very emotional, I'm not crying. There's not water coming out of my face.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no judgment around, well, are you grieving hard enough? Are you
Right.
like, are you sad enough? Like,
Yeah.
we're getting into judgment here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I wanted to bring up before we get into some of the stats that we've pulled, but is just a little personal anecdote that I've talked about on this podcast a couple of times. But my wife and I lost a child almost 8 years ago. And one of the things I was told by a couple of different people was, and one of them was someone who had also lost a child, was that sometimes what happens when a couple loses a child is the dad tends to close himself off and not want to talk about it, and the mom wants to talk about it, but he won't, and it causes like this, divide between the husband and the wife. And the advice that I was given was talk about it. Like, even if you don't want to, make yourself talk about it. So my wife and I went and we saw a therapist for a couple of months, and it was immensely helpful. And to be honest, I have 5 sisters and 1 brother that I grew up with, and some of the characteristics I have, I think, came from having a very feminine household. And I've never really struggled to talk about my feelings. It's just the way things were, I've talked about my feelings because that's what everyone around me was doing. And so for me, it was natural to do that, fortunately. But I think it is really important for men to talk about their feelings. And I think sometimes we get this idea that, oh yeah, we can't talk about our feelings. Well, what does that do to your wife if you're not willing to talk with her about how you're feeling and about how she's feeling and strengthen each other? And, sometimes like she was having really difficult days and she needed me to help her out. And sometimes it was the opposite. But if I'm not talking to her to, so that she can help me, well, then I'm also not talking with her to help her out either. And so I think if we have this idea that we have to shoulder our burdens lightly and we can't talk about it, I don't think that just impacts you, it impacts the people around you as well. And that was my experience, was as we talked to each other and with our therapist, and we just, anytime one of us needed to talk, we talked. That really helped us to get to a point where we felt like we had a new normal. We still miss our daughter, we still grieve. Like, I don't think we ever will stop grieving, but I think we got to a point of health, where a balance where we can live a normal, happy life and love our other children and be there for them. Mm-hmm. And I think not shouldering my burdens lightly was what helped me get to that point.
Yeah.
So with that was kind of my anecdote.
Yeah.
One of our questions was, how does, and we had some other questions, but I feel like we already addressed them. But I want to talk about this just for a minute. How does shouldering our burdens quietly affect us in our 4 pillars of health? So our physical health, our mental health, spiritual health, financial health. What does that do to us?
So I really wanted to get Chris's perspective on this,
Yep.
because, like you said, you've been doing this work for 15 years and you've seen people come through and people that don't feel like enough. And so one of the things that came to my mind while we were going through all of this information is generationally, right? I think if we go back to when we were all growing up, I mean, you're a couple of years younger, but we all kind of grew up in the same era. And it basically was this: boys don't cry. Boys can get beamed with a baseball and fall down, break their arm rollerblading, and you should just stand up and shake it off and get back to whatever you were doing. And so to me, it was kind of like, what are we teaching our young boys? And and how is that having an effect on our overall health now as we are growing into men? And so what kinds of things are you seeing with your clients as they're coming in with some of this stuff?
I like that. I like the direction of that. And first, Perry, I just want to acknowledge what you said. That hits home. And so it hits my heart, man. Very, very sorry for that loss, that you've had to walk that path.
Thanks.
I appreciate what you said about communicating with your wife and being there for her too. Mm-hmm. Statistically speaking, couples who lose a child don't stay together. Mm-hmm. And so I admire whatever it is, kind of the unknowns for me, but whatever it is that you guys did mm-hmm. to navigate through that loss and are continuing to navigate through that loss. props to you. Kudos to you. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. It is a painful thing. And to broaden that, when we go through pain, we have that tendency to shrink back, to numb out, right? I have one of those brains that when I'm highly stressed, when I'm in a significant amount of pain, physical or emotional or otherwise, my brain knows how to numb that out.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to check out. I know how to distract and deflect. The choice in that is, I don't want the results of that. I don't want the consequences of going down that path.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to figure out how to absorb, feel it, absorb it, and deal with it. So the whole spectrum of getting beamed with the baseball and going,
Like walk it off,
that kind of thing. But it's not, you don't get beamed with a baseball and go, it's nothing. I didn't get hit. That's ego, right? You're communicating to the pitcher, you suck. You don't throw hard. My mom throws harder than you, or whatever, that kind of stuff.
My grandma throws harder than you.
And that might be gamesmanship in a way.
Yeah.
I make room for that. When I get on a basketball court or when I'm on a diamond with people, like, there's a different person that comes out. My wife even said one time, it was about a year ago actually, she came and watched us. We were doing some co-ed softball for work, and she came to watch us play. And she goes, "You're different." I was like, "What do you mean? Like, we've been married for 10 years now. Like, what do you mean I'm different?" She's like, "It's a different environment. It's a different element."
My wife said the same thing about city basketball. She's like, when you're out there warming up, like, you don't even notice I'm there. I'm like, sorry, I'm just in the zone, right?
Yeah. She's even said, there are times where I'll get a call, at home. It's a work call, and it might be a client or it might be a business matter. And she's given me the feedback over the years that there's a different voice. You're different. You go into this mode, because I think I'm that silly dad. I think I'm a teaser. I think I'm very sarcastic and like kind of carefree as a human being, but understanding like there's this other role that I play. And I think there's room for that concept with a guy like Matt Walsh or other people that would say strong things similarly to that. Mm-hmm. So coming back to the question, and you might have to read back through it so we get me back on track.
Basically, just how does this concept of shouldering our burdens quietly and holding everything back, how does that affect all of the other areas of our health? And for us, specifically the 4 pillars, the physical, mental, spiritual, and financial.
Well, when you were talking about this idea of balance and kind of like our senses, we all think about the 5 senses, and I think there are more than that, but we all know what the 5 senses are. And whoever the experts are, they say that if you lose one sense, the other ones kind of get enhanced. They kind of become better. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to understand the neurophysiology around all of that, but I don't. Yeah. So if I'm in struggle in one of these 4 pillars, my hope is that the other ones kind of rise up. Whether they do it autonomously, I don't know, or if I have to focus in those areas a little bit more to buoy and to boost up this other one where I'm in struggle. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people to an extreme, we can say we're avoiding the issue and focusing on the things that we have control over, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing, mm-hmm. but done in turbo mode, maybe that's where the error comes in. Yeah, maybe that's where the problem comes in. Mm-hmm. So I think there needs to be room for, this is what I'm feeling right now. This is the experience that I'm having, and this will pass, but I don't know when. But here's what's within my control is talking about it. If it's appropriate for me to cry and I'm not manipulating somebody, but maybe there's a time and place and there's an audience for that too.
Mm-hmm. I think I really like the last thing you said, especially about what's in my control. Talking about it, journaling about it, right? What are the things that I can do? And I think if you're focusing on those things, what I experienced with navigating through grief was, as I did those things, I felt better mentally, and that helped me feel better spiritually. I was more likely to get up and do something than just lie down in bed all day, which I did some of that too, and I felt like that was helpful, mm-hmm. but you can't do that indefinitely the rest of your life. And, the first couple weeks after our daughter passed away, like, we didn't go to church. We were just too it was too much, right? To go there and see other people with their children. And, we spent, it was probably only like 2 weeks. And then for a couple of months, we would go to just the first section of church, and then we wouldn't stay for the Sunday school portion. And we kind of slowly eased our way into it. I think if we didn't allow ourselves to talk about it and to do all the things that were in our control, I think our spiritual health would have been impacted to the point that maybe we would have never gone to church again. And some people don't go to church, and that's okay. They can, still have a spiritual lifestyle, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, that spirituality, going to church is a huge part of that, and I would have missed out on that. And then financially, that's the other thing where, we think about financial health, I think sometimes as being totally separate. It's like, what are you investing in and how much are you saving? But your career trajectory and the effort that you're putting into your job is impacted by your other areas of health. So
let me add in something if I can. The role of retail therapy in making us feel good. There's a dopamine release when I get that Amazon package. There's a dopamine release when I get a new, like I'm wearing a new shirt, and it's, man, this made me feel so good to put this on. And I can tease a little bit about that because we can do it and it's fine, right? Oh, I'm struggling today. I'm gonna have ice cream for dinner, or after dinner. But it's if that pattern, or if that one-off turns into a pattern, or turns into a, now I've consumed nothing but ice cream for a month, we've got an issue here.
Right.
Or I'm buying so many things that the rest of my life can't navigate that. I can't afford that, or I can't. It's not going to keep up with it. But again, I'm seeking pleasure, right? There's two things that I think two aspects to every action in this world that I believe we're seeking pleasure and or avoiding pain. Everything. And to a listener or a viewer, you might press pause and argue with me. Do it. I dare you. Okay. You will not find something, save something that's based in some sort of mental illness or disordered way of thinking. Okay. Everything from eating, right? We seek that pleasure. We also don't want to feel the pain of hunger, right? So every behavior, unless there's some type of wound, illness, trauma, or something that kind of twists the reality within a person. Okay. So it's okay to get new stuff. It's okay to have ice cream. It's okay to so on and so forth. But are we numbing out, even in an addictive fashion or in an avoidant fashion, where that's going to lead to other problems? So that balance piece. Okay, financial is a struggle right now. How can these other areas of that your four pillars buoy the person up and boost them until things are a little bit better in that way?
Yeah.
So we want a long-term trajectory, and I think you talk about that with a career as well. Is somebody's employment really good for them financially, but it doesn't help them spiritually? It doesn't help them from a standpoint of maybe their value is to be with their family, to have family dinner together. But maybe that job pays really well, and they got a lot of nice stuff, but they're never home for dinner, right? Or they work weekends or something like that. We want to pay attention to those things so that we have that overall balance.
Yeah, awesome.
I love that.
Do you want to jump?
Yeah, so I want to go back to one of the things that you mentioned just a little bit ago, and you said something about, I know in my mind how to turn off, right? I can deflect, I can detach, I can avoid. And so just, a kind of a personal experience. Last year, I was going through some pretty serious mental health issues and trying to figure things out. And I remember one day I'd just gotten off, I had gotten off work and I was sitting in my chair. My kids were just playing and they were just being kids. And I don't know what exactly happened, but I lost it. And I ended up, I just had to clench my fists. I got up, I walked out of the room, I went in my bedroom, I locked the door, turned off all the lights, and I just laid down on my bed and curled up in a fetal position. And I couldn't move for about 5 or 10 minutes. I wouldn't even let my wife in the door. And so that idea that I can detach from the situation, I feel that. I know that a lot of times we try and hold it in for so long until we snap, until you can no longer hold it in. And I think when I was listening to this, and we are, for those of you listening and viewing right now, we are focusing a lot more on the men's aspect of this, because I feel like that's kind of the forgotten demographic when we talk about emotions, we talk about feelings, and we talk about holding it in. It's kind of stereotypical expectation of men that we hold our feelings in. And so I really wanted to get into how unhealthy that can be over the long term. And one of the comments, like I said, I just started reading through the comments. And one of the comments that I read basically said, parentheses, insert violent crime statistic here. And it really got me thinking. And so I actually went to the CDC. And I didn't go for the violent crime, but I went to look at suicide statistics. And this is where it gets, like, it really hits home for all three of us, because this is exactly the point in life where we can be. And basically what I found is that last year's suicide statistics, there was almost 50,000 people in the United States that committed suicide. And white males between the ages of 35 and 65 were like 90% of that. Men in general are almost 4 times more likely to take their own life than a woman. And I think that we look at this idea, this kind of projection that society puts on men, and I've gone back and I look at Hollywood's portrayal of men in movies and TV shows, and we're supposed to be these bumbling idiots. And we're supposed to, like, basically just give up all control of anything, and we don't feel anything, and we're just goofballs all the time. And I wondered how much of that and how much of this idea of walk it off plays into this statistic right here of how much more likely it is for me as a middle-aged white man to lose my life to suicide than anybody else.
It's interesting what you bring up about the Hollywood perception, which is like the opposite of what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like both of them were kind of extreme, because, my dad's day, it was, you're tough, you walk it off, you shoulder your burdens quietly, right? That Matt Walsh's ideal, I feel like it's a little extreme. Now, there's some truth to it. Men are stronger than women biologically and tend to cry less. I think maybe even in a biological sense. I don't know about that for sure, but that's just my perception. But that was kind of like the portrayal of men, like the John Wayne, strong, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of morphed into this opposite of like the Modern Family. Is that the show? Yeah, Modern Family, where he's kind of the idiot. And it's funny, it's humorous. I think that show's hilarious. But the mom is like the smart one and getting everything done, and the man is like, oh, I'm just here, right?
And that's kind of the any idiot. General sitcom that's on TV today. Yeah. And even you go back into the 90s and watch any of the sitcoms then, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
The husband, the father, is always just this complete idiot, has no control over the family or their life, and the mom is the strong one.
Yeah. It's interesting. And but there's somewhere in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. There are times to be strong, and there are times where it's okay to not know the answer and to, be soft. But that's okay, right? Yeah. It's just recognizing, do you have a balance with that? And yeah.
This just crossed my mind, and before I jump to that, I just want to acknowledge that in Modern Family, Claire might be the strong one or whatever, but she's also neurotic.
Yeah, that's true.
Be diagnosed again. It's Hollywood. It's a fictional character, right? And it's across state lines. Right? I think they record in California. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But she'd probably be diagnosed with OCD, significant anxiety, even perhaps some trauma based on some childhood experiences and family dynamics and those kinds of things, right? So check that stuff aside. Yes, those roles are kind of pushed on us, and we are fed material and information for a purpose. Now, I think it's important to pay attention to, and I lost my train of thought, so I don't know if you would ask that question again and go back and edit it, or I'm 40.
just thoughts that you have about general society perception of men and how it relates to the suicide rates.
Yeah. I think we're taught, as you mentioned, the John Wayne piece. You used the word extremes, and if society, culture focuses on, let's use John Wayne as male, right? Indicative of the male masculinity, whatever it is. The critique of that, there's a tendency to abandon ship and go to the opposite end of the spectrum. Right. And that's not good.
Right.
That's not okay as a rule and as a process, nor in that strength that we would perceive from a John Wayne type character that I'm going to protect. It's not that I'm invincible, but it's I'm going to protect, and these are my roles, and this is my responsibility to care for my children or my spouse or my whatever it is. To then go into this drivel, this bumbling, emotionally like the men that we watched in that video, just and I don't intend to mock, but the idea where that's used and it appears as weakness, that comes across as weakness. Now, even Matt talked about in his take, the occasional. Here are some circumstances, and again, it's going to be subjective, but that manipulative tactic, I just want to bring that up one more time. Men and women, it is okay to feel. It is okay to worry. It is okay to be stressed and to be overwhelmed and to go talk to somebody. I'm really blessed. I've got a group of guys that I do breakfast with or lunch with and golf trips or whatever it is, or text threads, and we talk and we feel, and people go, I'm stressed about this, and this is what's going on in my life. I think that's a little rare in our society.
Yeah.
Now, we don't sit around and just stare at each other like eyes, snot coming out. And this is just horrible. And how are we gonna, those kinds of things. And that's a little bit maybe anecdotal and silly to bring that up in that way. But we have a serious issue that 50,000 people ended their lives in 1 year. That is heartbreaking and alarming. So I would love to dissect, and we won't do it today, but I would love to dissect the why behind all of that.
Yeah.
And if I believe firmly that if one person listens to this or watches this and had that in their brain, that suicide was the escape because no one else cared, no one else would listen, or it was too embarrassing to be weak, to have had those kinds of thoughts, that we could prevent them from ending things. This is a miracle.
Absolutely.
That's what we want.
100%.
And so that's a very tall order. It's a very high number, but we need to be trajecting. We need to be moving in a lowering direction. Those numbers need to be dropping, not increasing, So again, it's okay to feel. We're not trying to communicate that anyone who's crying is suddenly manipulative and we should question their motives.
Right.
But we want that in authenticity. Across vocations, we want to deal with coworkers and partners and community allies that are authentic and genuine. We want that. And so it's really unfortunate that emotion has now been weaponized in that manipulative way too, because it leads people to think, well, they're going to think I'm manipulative, or they're going to think I'm weak, or I'm trying to get something out of them, or whatever. So it might even lead some people to be more stoic, to be more quiet, to try to just shoulder the burden. I don't want to bother anybody. So I would err on the side of get it out, bring it up. Especially in my office, bring it up. You can say whatever words you want. You can call me names. You can't put your hands on me, but you can say things and you can direct it at me, because I know it's not about me, right? And so if I show up in that space with my wife or my child or my friends, same thing applies. Now, it might be directed at me with my wife, but
we've all been there.
Yeah, thank you. But that's the concept. Is I'd rather those emotions come up so that we can do something with it. We can organize it and put things back into balance.
Right.
Definitely.
I love that.
Yeah. This has been awesome. I don't know if there's anything before the challenge, Adam, that you had in mind.
I think that nailed it. I think that's I think it's awesome that we have at least somewhat of a culture, or we're moving towards a culture now where it's being more recognized that it's okay for men to have feelings and it's okay to share those feelings, and it's okay to seek out professional help when needed.
And it's also okay to be strong and to, to provide and protect and to,
and you can
be stoic at times, right?
And you can be both of those things.
Exactly.
You can.
It's not one or the other.
Yeah. Having emotions doesn't make you weak, and not showing emotion doesn't make you strong, right? It's that balance, right? We have to find when is it appropriate, when is it okay to release those feelings and to share that with somebody, and when do I need to be a protector, or when do I need to be the strong man?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So our challenge, and so Chris, we issue a challenge each week to the couple of people that listen to our podcast, and our challenge for this week is to talk to someone about something difficult that you're going through. So, and if needed, cry. Now that's not a requirement. If you feel like it's there and it's going to help you, don't fight it. Is I guess the challenge.
And if it's more than 2 tears, that's okay.
That is okay. Yeah. We're not going to put a limit on the number of tears. In fact, that was one of the things that I learned in therapy is 20 years down the road, you might just start bawling because your daughter would be getting married now. That's okay, right? There's never a point where you're like, I'm done grieving. I'm never going to cry about it again. That's okay. Now, I cry very infrequently about my daughter now. I've gotten to the point where it's maybe a couple times a year on her birthday. Right, there are times where I'll still cry about it, but it's decreased because I've gotten to a healthy state. But it still happens sometimes, and that is okay. So talk with someone. Yeah.
I think just really quick, that brings up another good point, though, is I think one of the things that I thought of when I was seeing this is the judgment that people feel towards seeing a man cry.
Yeah.
And I think the key is you never know what somebody else is going through.
Yeah.
And you never know why that person is crying. And we should, maybe if we see somebody that looks down, even if there's not tears coming out of their face, embrace them, right? Show them that there is somebody that cares, that they are valuable and that they do matter. Because that like we said, could be the difference, right? That could save someone's life.
I've learned that sometimes the people that I want to matter to most in my life are busy. Sometimes the people that I want to matter to most have other things on their plate. Maybe there are other things going on in their life, and that's disappointing and heartbreaking. And so when I tell people, usually on our podcast, I'll say, you do matter. And I'll hear people respond with, well, you just say that. It's just a cliche. So I've invited that in. I've invited that emotion and that perspective in. Even though I want to argue with it because I have evidence, because I care. I might not have never met that person that's in London, right? Or in rural Utah, wherever that might be. And so the feeling that, well, how could you care? When you know that level of love for humanity as a whole, when you've walked through hells, when you've observed people walk through their own hells, that desire for human connection is so different. It's so deep. And it navigates past all of the barriers of what we look like and how we're different, and political views and which sports team do you like, and is it Coke or Pepsi, and like some of the trivial stuff that doesn't matter, but then also those other things that kind of go, oh, we're different, or they're different. We're human first, and we need that connection. I believe this firmly. We need that connection for healing. And so when there is that struggle, when there is pain, we need somebody there. It's not always a therapist. It's not always a partner. It's not always a parent. I tell some kids, struck out when it came to parents. Matt Walsh will be losing his mind right now because here it comes. Right?
Yeah.
But it's okay to feel it. And there are safe people there. But sometimes we've got to acknowledge that the people I want to care for me, there's something else going on. They aren't going to be able to show up for me. And so it's okay to find that safe, ideally safe and healthy set of support network that will show up. And I get to show up for them. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and also, Perry, to acknowledge, we could have walked through some pains in the past and we think, well, I'm over it. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
No, we're not.
Right.
And it's not a weakness. It's not a sign that you did it wrong or that you didn't do it good enough, whatever it was. There's just a little more of that wound. And I use the term scar tissue, because it's always there, and it's going to get pricked every now and again. It's okay to feel it. Sometimes those tears aren't sadness. It's joy, it's comfort, it's peace, it's being proud of a child who's navigated through hardship or something like that. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Love it.
I think this has been an awesome discussion.
I agree, and I just want to say thank you, Chris, for showing up. Thanks for taking part in this discussion, and thank you for everything that you do for people that you help. And I absolutely am amazed by people that can take that kind of responsibility on.
Yeah. And we've talked about Hobble Creek Behavioral Therapy. Did I get that right?
Yep.
And then your podcast as well. But I don't think we talked about your social medias for people to follow. So where can people find you?
If you want to get in touch with me, and sometimes it's a matter of I want to tell you that you don't have hair or your beard is gray or whatever it is, and like you can smack talk me. But you can find me on Instagram at Chris Wilkins Therapy. I also have a what else? Facebook. There's a Facebook group that's going to start growing, kind of some support groups. We've got a men's support group, and then there's a women's support group, and we talk about a variety of different things. Sometimes it's relationships and betrayal traumas, and sometimes it's I'm overwhelmed and co-parenting and all that kind of stuff. And so some of those are open to only people in Utah because it's a therapeutic group, and then some of those things are you can be in London or you could be in the Philippines or Arizona, because it's a support group, and so we just run it differently, different dynamics. But our goal is kind of like the little girl on the beach that had all the starfish. And if you haven't heard that story or you haven't read that story, just go Google it.
There's also a very funny Studio C sketch about that.
I'll have to look that one up.
But yeah, it's a good story.
But yeah, the mission is really to just impact one person's life. And if there's an opportunity for us to be part of that, then that's wonderful. And if not, anybody who might listen to our words today or any of the other things that I'm involved in, my hope is that kind of the good becomes infectious and contagious. The hope and the healing become they grow and they magnify and multiply. So I appreciate you guys inviting me.
Yeah, well, yeah, we appreciate it. So, I'm at the top here. So, thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review or a like, and check out Chris as well. Comments, exactly.
And don't forget we will have new episodes coming out on Mondays. I think we did miss one a couple weeks ago, but
we did miss one.
Okay. Right. But yeah, mostly always on Mondays. We're gonna have new episodes coming out. And you can find us basically anywhere you listen to podcasts: YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Google, any of that kind of stuff. And then
I think this is our next episode topic, right? What is the meaning of rock bottom?
So next week we're gonna be talking about a concept that I've dealt with several times in my life.
We should have the rock guy on for that one.
Oh yeah, and I really wanted to talk about this concept of rock bottom and what exactly that means. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.